Well, welcome in wherever you are around the world to stage 3 of the 24th Tour of Magnificent Qinghai in northwestern China, one of the highest altitude stage races in the world, as we look back on what was a remarkable day yesterday in stage 2. And what a moment it was for Manuel Peñalver from Team Polti Visit Malta, getting to wear the yellow jersey, having won the sprint stage on day 1 in the downtown city of Zinning. It was never going to be on his shoulders for too long, because this stage was particularly brutal, with riders going as high as 11,000 feet. It included some of the biggest mountains that you'll see in the world of road cycling, including the Beishan Yaku Mountain, which was at 3,778 metres. But this man here, Simon Pelot, the Swiss rider for Ning, stayed away for much of the day. It was a gutsy, it was a courageous performance from the experienced Swiss rider. Great opportunity for one of the factory teams out of China, Ning Star, to get some real coverage and hopefully inspire the next generation of Chinese riders to take up the sport. The hilly course would take its toll. It led to a small group of riders getting away, and when it came down to a sprint finish, it was between Jonathan Casido of Petrolike and one of the race favourites, Guillermo Silva of Caja Rural, the man from Uruguay. And in fact, it was one of the pre-race favourites, Guillermo Silva, who would take out the stage. And what a moment for him and his Caja Rural team. A team stacked full of climbers. It would mean that he would then move into the yellow jersey. Jonathan Casido would finish second, and Menyuan, the winner of the Tour back in 2023, would end up third in the stage. And that's how GC would look heading in to today's stage, stage 3. Stage 3, well, it's a brutal stage. It's from the city of Huzhu, where they finished yesterday, to the city of Menyuan, a total distance of 219.5 kilometres. The athletes getting to a height of 11,300 feet above sea level. Always an opportunity for the teams to sign in. George Jackson there from the Burgos team, New Zealand rider. And this team here, Caja Rural, responsibility now of defending the yellow jersey. What a moment for Guillermo Silva, who finished second overall in the Tour last year, looking to try and go one better. Ning Star, well, they will have the King of the Mountains jersey, and that sits deservedly on the shoulders of Simon Pelot. "22 teams in all, 155 riders starting this 24th edition of Magnificent Qinghai. Today's stage particularly tough, with the first 30 kilometres straight uphill, with the riders reaching that maximum height of 11,300 metres above sea level. Euskaltel Ustadi, the great Spanish team, well and truly established in the world of professional cycling, showing some of the scars from some of the ferocious descents that occurred yesterday. Henok Mulubran, African continental champion, the man riding for Astana, 4th last year, winner of the Tour 2 years ago. He will wear the green Sprint Ace jersey. Weather conditions, well, a cool 14 degrees, humidity, but it's going to get colder as they begin the climb. Riders already starting at an altitude of just over 7,500 feet in the town of Huzhu. There is the leading Asian rider in this year's Tour. There's Bardiani. And there is Guillermo Silva. Simon Pelot from Ning Star. Such a gutsy performance yesterday. Thoroughly deserves to be in the King of the Mountains polka dot jersey. Enoch Mulu-Brandt, well, he'll be looking for higher honours, but he'd be happy to wear out that green Sprint Ace jersey today. He won the jersey last year, the yellow 2 years ago. And this man here, Saeed Sevradeh from Iran, the leading Asian rider in the blue jersey. Always wonderful ceremony in this part of China. Such a proud nation, the Chinese, and they really do bring their culture to this event. And the riders certainly enjoy the cultural experience, the cultural side of it. Perfect weather conditions yesterday. It has changed overnight. So the city of Huzhu welcomed them yesterday with warm weather, sends them off today in blustery, cool conditions. Talk about the city of Huzhu at 7,500 feet. Well, altitude has an effect on the body at 2,000 feet. So they're working before they even start turning the pedals. They haven't had any real time with their professional seasons to obviously acclimatise, try and spend some time at altitude. You'd love to spend about 3 weeks prior to racing for the body to make the adjustments to allow for the physiological changes. It really is a stunning little town, the town of Huzhu. The whole Qinghai region really is spectacular. The yellow fields of rapeseed that you'll see throughout today's stage. Mountains in the background which go as high as 16,000 feet. And so this was earlier this morning. Flag drops and it goes on. To all have a strategy. They would have all sat down, looked at how things played out through the first 2 stages, looked at the topography of what is to come over this 219 kilometre stage, and decide at what point they want to attack. Do they want to send someone up the road in the break? Do they want to allow it to come down to a sprint? As I said, the responsibility sits on the shoulder of the Taha Rural Seguros team. Today's stage, as mentioned, it basically starts uphill for the first 30 kilometres. It is absolutely brutal. Then a long descent from about the 35 kilometre mark through to about the 60 kilometre mark, and then it's just a gradual, what professional riders might almost describe as a little bit of a false flat, and that occurs then for the next 70 to 80 kilometres before they hit the second big climb of the day, Guillermo, and then up to the Kamulong Yaku climb, 4.9 kilometres at a gradient of 5%, and then it's undulation all the way through to the town of Menyuan, where a large crowd will certainly acknowledge and appreciate the athleticism and what these athletes had to endure over this 219.5 kilometre stage. Of Menyuan, alongside of the Datong River, in the Tibetan Plateau. There is some of the magnificent scenery, clear blue skies yesterday, overcast and cloudy today, as we have a look at the fields of rapeseed, so prevalent in this area. Sprint Ace points up for grabs at 34.3, first mountain climb, I should say, at 34.3 kilometres. Sprint Ace points up for grabs at 94.7. Then 2 Mountain, King of the Mountain stages at 143.8, 151.2, and of course, more sprint ace points up for grabs at 182 kilometres. George Jackson, the New Zealander, well, he has been out on the road pretty much from the start. He got into the early break along with the man who was in the break all day yesterday, the very, very good Swiss rider, Simon Pelot of Switzerland, riding for Ning Star. You can just sort of sense, though, that the wheels have just started to fall off. The man from Wellington, New Zealand, who's probably more of a sprinter than he is a mountain climber, as the peloton begins to make their move. And of course, Caja Rural, defenders of the jersey on the road, are the team on the front doing the work. Earlier today, up the first big climb of the day, the peloton, well, it basically got dismantled. It split clearly into 2 significant groups. And those that did survive the first climb, well, I can say the entire Caja Rural team ended up making it over the top. Didn't have to try and find a way back into the main peloton. The likes of Alex Diaz, Juan Bo, Samuel Fernandez, Francisco João Peñalver, Guillermo Silva, the man in the yellow jersey, Tyler Stolitz, United States rider, very good GC rider, winner of the Redlands Classic, and also Fernando Barcello. As we see Simon Pelot, just desperately wanting to get to the top of this climb. More King of the Mountain points up for grabs. Extended his lead in that category with picking up 7 points on the first big climb of the day, as we mentioned, the Balong Yaku climb. Now trying to get to the top of the Guizhang climb. Further 5 points up for grabs if he can be first across the line. From Switzerland, been a professional going right back to 2012. He won a stage in the Tour of Hainan back in 2018. GC winner of La Tour de la Bretagne Cycliste back in 2023 and the Tour de la Menyuan 2019, so he is used to standing on the highest step of the podium. But certainly been incredibly aggressive. Remarkable that he could bounce back from having done so much work yesterday, so much time out on his own, to be able to back it up today. Just looking at his computer, looking at his power meter, his heart rate monitor, making sure that he just continues to eat, continues to drink. There is those King of the Mountain points, Category 2 climb. So now just a little bit of a chance to relax on the downhill before he has to go again, because the third of the King of the Mountain points is around about 8 kilometres away, and that is the Gamulong Yaku climb, 4.9 kilometres at a gradient of 5%. Really good performance from Ning Star. As mentioned, very much the locals here in the town of Menyuan, the town of Huzhu, will look at Ning Star, any of the Chinese trade teams, and see them very much as one of their own, whether they come from the likes of Switzerland, the United States. Ning Star got a couple of New Zealanders in their team as well, so almost be adopted as Chinese riders. Really a spectacular country. But as mentioned over the first 2 days of this tour, you've got to be comfortable with your head above the clouds. It's one of the highest altitude stage races in the world. And there is that Caja Rural team. Guillermo Silva Looked so good yesterday too when he won that sprint to win stage 2. And well, New Zealander George Jackson really just a chance now for him to sit up, drink, grab some food. He's in no man's land. Man who won the Tour of Taihu Lake in 2023. Stage victories at the Tour of Langkawi, Tour of Hainan back in 2023, won the opening stage that day. Second place finishes and stages. 7 New Zealanders riding in this year's Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. So earlier today, the results of that sprint through Huzhu. George Jackson picking up the maximum 5 points. Simon Belor, the 2 in the break, going across the line in second. Had an agreement that I think George would pick up the sprint points and Simon would pick up the King of the Mountains points, as he was on the King of the Mountain polka dot jersey at the start of the day. And interesting to see the yellow jersey leader, Guillermo Silva, picking up the additional 1 point for being third across the line. Clearly led the peloton across the line in that designated sprint zone. It was an interesting first climb today when we saw the riders having to go over Belongshan Yaku climb. Really did hurt a large part of the peloton. We had the 2 riders up the road in Simon Pelot and Jackson, the New Zealander. And the group split into 3, peloton split into 3 main groups. Henok Mulubran was part of it. We had the likes of Kolnagi, Rojas, Zanincello go over the top, all riders for VF Group Bardiani. But every single member of the Kaha Rural team also was in that lead group over the top of the climb, just demonstrating how hard they are going to be in terms of trying to lift that yellow jersey in the days coming off the shoulders of Guillermo Silva. So here he is, Simon Belor. He'll just be wanting to really just get to the top of the Kamulong Yaku climb, which he's on now, and then pick up the maximum King of the Mountain points on offer here on day 3, stage 3. Well and truly established himself in that polka dot jersey. Just see there, just one of these niggly little climbs, small chainring on the front, mid-range gear at the back. Just sort of sense the fatigue is really just starting to kick in now. He has been out on his own for pretty much 150 kilometres. And this was earlier today, up the Belongshan Yaku climb, picking up those valuable 7 points on offer for that King of the Mountains category. As mentioned, 11,300 feet. There was a lot of carnage, a lot of riders just dropping off the back. It did come back together, the peloton. Yeah, one of the real skills too. There's the jackets on and off. Conditions changed a lot throughout the day. The sun has broken out at points, and this was earlier. George Jackson picking up the sprint ace points, and Simon Ballot deciding that, George, you go for those. And then Guillermo Silva coming across the line, leading the peloton to pick up that additional 1 point as mentioned. So world-class helicopter crew, world-class camera crew out on the motorbikes from both China and from Europe. The Gaha Rural boys just set the tempo on the front, just avoiding anybody from trying to break away here. Set the tempo strong enough. It does make it very hard for one rider to launch and stay away. Be very, very mindful of Henok Mulubran from Astana, the African continental champion, the man from Eritrea, the emerging powerhouse out of Africa. What a nation Eritrea have been when it comes to producing cyclists. Denis Gourmet, of course, the most famous, having won the green jersey last year in the Tour de France and having won 3 stages. Another one of the riders too there from Eritrea. Oldest rider in this year's tour is Yohan Sobel, 44 years of age. Saeed Savrazadeh, the man who is leading the Asian points throughout 2 days of this tour, 39 years of age. Enrique de Silva Avancini, 36 years of age. Mikel Bizkarra from Euskaltel Ustadi, 35 years of age. Aaron Gate, one of New Zealand's greatest ever cyclists, 34 years of age, these days with the Astana team. So certainly a sport where, I guess, sports science and time is saying that, look, you can be just as good at 40 as you are at 30. That's to do with nutrition, sports science, rest and recovery, periodization and training zones. I think a lot of riders, though, it just comes down to how many years are you prepared to suffer? How many years and how many days of your life do you just want to go out and hurt? So many days for cyclists, you wake up with dreams of glory, and those days often end in disappointment. It's a sport where you've got to learn how to lose to learn how to win. And then you suddenly just have that one day where it all does come together, and it's just that motivation to want you to continue to believe and continue to chase the dream. So interesting just to see there with the yellow sleeves and the black. That is Solution Tech Vinny Fantini. More of a team that, if it comes down to a sprint finish to stay, which is looking more than likely, certainly have a chance of winning the stage today with the likes of David Baldacchini, who won stage 1 2 years ago in the city of Zinning and finished second in stage 2 last year. You've got the likes of Antilio Viviani, Andrea Pires, Arnaud Tissieres, very, very good sprinters, all riding for Solution Tech Vini Fantini. Just see, just everywhere they go, it's just uphill. Not a lot of relief. Riders at times just trying to get out of their seats, just trying to use a slightly different muscle group, just to try and give the big muscles and a little bit of recovery. Good skill set to be able to climb efficiently both in the seat and out of the seat. Most climbers will tend to stay seated, but do spend time learning how to ride comfortably for long periods out of your seat, just to give yourself that little bit of a break, particularly on these longer stages. And this is a long stage today. 225 kilometres in total. So, at the moment, 2 minutes 55, peloton back from our leader and King of the Mountains jersey leader, Simon Pelor from Ning Star, the Chinese-based trade team, the man from Switzerland, and George Jackson, the New Zealander. You can just see he's got a bit of a hurt face on now. Form is just starting to go a little bit. You'll often hear me talk about it most days or most stages. Don't look at the facial expression so much. Start to look at the form of riders to see whether they are in trouble. You tend to see them not spinning as smoothly. The cadence not quite as high. They tend to be leaning a little bit more on the bigger gears. Just see a little bit more upper body movement. And so, contrast there. The form of George Jackson and this man here, Simon Pelot, who still looks pretty comfortable. Still got a nice smooth pedal cadence. Nice high cadence. Deep carbon rim wheels. He will get to the top of that Gamulong Yaku climb, and that will give him maximum King of the Mountain points, and well and truly secure him in that jersey for stage 4 tomorrow. And so George Jackson, well, it's been a remarkable day for him. He's done his Burgos team incredibly proud. He's been out there pretty much for 150 kilometres. A little bit of an accident there, possibly just a little bit of a crash, maybe just a little bit of lapse in concentration, possibly either taking a jacket on or off and maybe just losing grip of their handlebars, or either just sometimes just getting out of their seat, just rocking back a little bit. Real damage done. More just the handbrake going on for a number of riders. No one really coming down particularly hard, not a particularly fast part of the course. But they are tired, they are fatigued, small mistakes, no real intent. Every rider's guilty of it at some point. No point pointing the finger. There will be a little bit of a downhill here at the top of the Gamulong Yaku climb, which will allow George Jackson just a little bit of recovery. Really, it's just a stretch then of around about 30 kilometres or 40 kilometres of undulation, and then it's downhill to the finish line. So one of 7 New Zealand riders, as mentioned. 9 riders from Australia in this year's Tour. China, great to see them with 15 riders. The Italians have 19. Spain, dominant as ever with 23. When you run through the list, 38 nations represented at this 24th edition of the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. Athletes from Mongolia, the Philippines, Latvia, Chile, Iran, 2 riders from Iran. Turkey have 3 riders. So the sport of cycling, well and truly a global sport. The thing that impresses me the most is Eritrea have 6 riders. It's the likes of Henok Mulubran, Mahawi Kudus, who is riding today for Burgos as well. Real key thing here that he makes sure that he just gets that food in. It is a sport where you just never want to get hungry. He's got to keep drinking, got to keep eating. It's got to be just automatic. And it just needs to be rehearsed. And you've got to learn how to eat and drink under duress when the heart rate is high, when you're in that high, steady state. Really easy to drink and eat when you're sitting back in the peloton and conversations are going on and you're aerobic and the heart rate's down. Not so easy when you're under duress. So again, when you're doing your intervals and training, learn to eat and drink, learn to absorb when the heart rate is high. Clearly be looking for liquid calories. Don't really want to be chewing anything particularly tough when you're climbing up a mountain and your heart rate's high. Go into a further state of hypoxia. But again, we see this very good Alex Diaz on the front, driving the train for Caja Rural. And now one rider looking to try and just make a little bit of a break. So it's decided to hit the peloton. Decided to see if he can ride himself up to Simon Pelot, bridge the gap. Be a rider here just with the jackets on, very hard to pick up the colours, but potentially could be from the TR New Day Hotel cycling team. It might be our man who is leading the blue jersey points classification, the leading Asian rider, possibly Sei Sevrade. Could be Hassan Say Foliafard as well. As we come up, in fact, really was just to pick up King of the Mountain points, so not a tactical decision, just simply about trying to accumulate some UCI points and King of the Mountains. Thus the attack from him. The rest of the peloton rolling through that final King of the Mountains zone. It'll be delight for Simon Pelot of Ning Star first across, and therefore maximising, picking up all maximum points here on day 3, stage 3 of this 24th running of the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. So now the pain train gets to work, and it is the Caja Rural boys who continue to drive the chain. So Alex Diaz, Juan Bo, Samuel Fernandez, a good young all-rounder. Really was a standout at under 23 level at Copa de España. Got a really good uphill kick if needed. And now this descent on the other side. So 2:20 and 67 kilometres to go. They will catch him. But what an outstanding 2 days it has been for this man. What an outstanding 2 days it has been for Ning Star, well-known sports brand here in China, Ning. So that'll be really, really good for Chinese public to see a local brand doing so well, a local team doing so well. And there in the distance, some of the big mountains. Just think these riders are currently at about 9,500 to 10,000 feet. And then in the distance, you've got the Gan Shikia Peak, which rises up to an altitude of 17,238 feet. The rapeseed in the background, it really is just a stunning part of the world on a scale that you can just not imagine. Riders maybe the first chance to really take in some of the scenery. It was not a lot of time to warm up today on this particular stage. Really from the start, it was a gradual climb for the first 35 kilometres, starting at 2,400 metres, going up to 3,500 metres in the space of 30 odd kilometres. not the toughest climb, the Longshan Yaku climb, in terms of gradient. 10.1 kilometres at an average of 4.8%, but it certainly peaked a lot steeper in certain parts. Again, it's just the pace that the athletes were riding at and the oxygen deprivation that they were having to endure. I wonder what is going through the mind of this young man. Well, I should say young man, certainly a young man by by my age, but certainly an experienced rider at 32 years of age out of Switzerland. He'll just continue doing what he's doing. He's in a nice steady state here. He's got a good tempo going. He'll be looking at his computer. It'll be telling him the number of watts that he's putting out every time he turns those pedals. And there'll be watts that he'll be familiar with because he would have done a lot of tempo work in this particular zone. Probably just what we would call a high aerobic state here. Could probably, well, could hold a conversation by the looks of it. Form still looks good. Really nice circular pedal motion. Riders just wanting to try and make sure that they don't lose any energy. There's no little chink in the pedal stroke throughout the 360 degrees as we look at the great Henok Mulubrand from the Astana team on this tour by the smallest of margins back in 2023. Yeah, 2023 was a remarkable year. It really came down to the final stage from Gongji to Checker, the Salt Lakes of Checker. Timothy DuPont would win the stage. He would bookend, having won the first stage as well. And Eric Fagundes is riding for Burgos, a man from Uruguay, who won stage 2 last year as well. Thought he had won the tour overall, but Henok Mulubrand out-sprinted him, put about a 3-second gap onto him, and it was enough to secure victory. There was a discussion around whether or not it was considered to be the group across the line, but the race officials said no. There was certainly a disconnect, and Henok Mulubrand won it by the smallest of margins. Eric Fagundes as well, he's gone on to some very good things, having ridden for Burgos. Not in this year's race, but there would have been a wry smile on his face knowing that Guillermo Silva won stage 2 yesterday, a stage that he won himself a year ago. So Uruguay going back to back in stage 2 of the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. So that's still 2 minutes 20. 60.7 kilometres to going, so just over, well, probably just under an hour and a half of racing. Yeah, imagine they'll average well over 40 kilometres an hour, there or thereabouts. Astana team, well represented. Manuel Peñalver from Team Polti Visit Malta. We saw one of their riders there in the red, green and white, won stage 1. If he is in fact in the peloton, he potentially has the ability to pick up another stage victory if it does come down to a sprint. As there is a number of very, very good sprinters in the peloton who have the potential to win it. Enrico Zanincello, another one who has the ability, given the opportunity, if in fact he can just get on the right wheel, possibly get a bit of a lead out. Zanincello, of course, riding for VF Group Bardiani, so includes Luca Colnaghi and Manuel Torossi. George Jackson, who's actually been up the road and has only just been caught by the main peloton, the New Zealander. He is a sprint specialist as well. Another rider to keep an eye on too if it does come down to a sprint. Alexander Salby of Ning Star finished third on day one in the city of Zinning. As mentioned, Manuel Peñalver winning that stage, and Edouard Michael Grossu, the Belgian rider, finishing second. Quick Kern Farmer, well, they'll be looking for Mikel Fernandez. Best of the Caja Rural sprinters will be Francisco Peñuela. Good to see him smiling, looking pretty comfortable. The old race leader, Simon Pello. Just break up his concentration a little bit, just allow him just that little bit of reprieve, possibly having a chat there with one of the motorbike guys or camera crew. Team out of Belgium, out of the Netherlands, world class to most of the major races in Europe. Flying over here to join forces with a very good camera crew out of China. Skill set in itself. The riders and the cameramen work together. It's the case of being able to ride a motorcycle. To understand this sport, you've got to have a real understanding of your cameraman. They are very much teams who work together as one. And so what is going through the minds of these teams, you would imagine that they will be starting to, possibly in the back of their mind, accept the fact that this might just come down to a bunch sprint. Caja Rural will be more than happy with that, knowing that Guillermo Silva will still be in the yellow jersey tomorrow. Pressure comes on the likes of Henok Mulubran and the Astana boys, and where and at what point can they potentially grab that race leader's yellow jersey? That you just look at the depth of this Caja Rural team, and you look at the nature of this particular tour and the stages still to come, and the altitude that they're racing at. It is going to be a tough ask. But this is bike racing, folks, and anything can happen. So the Soigneurs out on the road feeding their teams, their designated domestiques, who will then go back and look to feed their other riders. There they are, the Team Pulte Visit Malta team for this year's tour in the famous green, white and red, looking to try and pick up another stage victory. as mentioned, you look at the mountain range in the background. It's currently at about 9,500 feet where they are, so you can imagine just how high that range is in the background. Still relatively mild at the finish line, sitting around about 14 degrees. Some of the locals come out, probably not really truly understanding what they're watching, but enjoying the pageantry and the colours, and something that is quite unique to them. We do walk around the town here, and I guess foreigners, Europeans particularly, are a little bit of a novelty for the locals. So I'm sure the riders will be spending a lot of time post-race taking photographs and signing autographs. As this main peloton just continues to count down the kilometres between here and the finish line. Actually, tomorrow will be an absolutely stunning stage from the town of Menyuan to the city of Qinghai. And tomorrow they will go as high as 13,000 feet. Highest point on the course in this year's tour. It'll come at the Jiangyangling Pass, 3,756 metres, a 9.9 kilometre climb, only 3.3% gradient, but pretty much they will ride the first 75 kilometres tomorrow from the town of Menyuan, where we're situated, where this race will finish today. And the first 70 kilometres will be pretty much all uphill. Once they get through to that 75 kilometre mark, in fact, it'll be then predominantly downhill through to the finish line. The great little alpine villages here in northern China, the town of Guillermo. So it's still Caja Rural controlling the front of the spike race as we do just take in some of this just stunning scenery. Northern part of China up on the Tibetan Plateau. Yellow rapeseed, which this area is famous for. Surrounding these riders, and then this magnificent alpine vista. So, Simon Pelot, remarkably good form for a guy who has, well, coming up to now having pretty much been out on his own for 170 odd kilometres. He's had George Jackson there helping him for much of that, or certainly through 140 kilometres. Still holding that peloton at bay, minute 35 now, just asking for a bit of an update through the race radios. As we go back here and look at George Jackson. Got the old down under mullet. And good to see one of the Chinese riders there too, from the Chinese national team. Starting to really establish themselves in international bike racing. They are the sleeping giant, aren't they, with the population that China does have, and they'll be looking at African nations like Eritrea with Benny Gourmet and saying to themselves, well, if they can do it, we can do it. We've got the resource, we've certainly got the training environment to do it. It's about getting the right coaches in place and having opportunities like this to benchmark against some of the best riders in the world. It's only going to take one at the highest level in the Tour de France to really establish themselves and sport of cycling, well, it'll spread like wildfire through the population, and look out the rest of the world when it does happen. Guillermo Starty team there in the orange coming through. 22 teams as mentioned. 155 riders starting this race. Got the Unibet, the Team of Rockets team. Team Polte Visit Malta, winners of stage 1. The Kipo Kern Farmer team. Shouldn't underestimate them. Colours are all green. Viv Group Bardiani, who are regular visitors to this part of the world. You've got the team out of Istanbul, the Quick Pro team. Petro-like, whose colours are green with white diagonal and red swoosh through the middle of the jersey. And then a group of trade teams out of China, including China Antar Mentec cycling team. A lot of these riders have a combination of homegrown talent and international riders. Ning Star, Chengdu, of course the city of Chengdu will be hosting the World Games in August. Big event internationally. World Games are basically the Olympics for non-Olympic sports. Things like ultimate frisbee, lacrosse, inline skating. A lot of sports that we saw at the Olympic Games in Paris came out of the World Games, such as rock climbing, sevens rugby, break dancing. There is the man, Saeed Savradeh, in the blue jersey out of Iran, one of the more experienced riders. He's done well to get back into the main peloton, along with a lot of these riders who were initially dropped on that first big climb of the day, where they went to 11,300 feet. Now just another one of these niggly little climbs on this rolling terrain at around about the 175k mark. Getting out of his seat, giving himself just that little bit of recovery, not really moving his gears too much, which says that fatigue hasn't kicked in. Often you see riders chopping and changing. It can be a sign that they're in a bit of trouble. One gear just feels a bit too hard, another gear feels just a bit too easy. When you are fatigued, you tend to lean a little bit more on your bigger gears. Peloton just starts to look a little bit more pedestrian, so as long as it's bunched like this, generally means the pace is not on. Once you see the big long line, that generally means, well, things are starting to gear up a little bit. It really would be one of the great stage wins in the history of this event. If Simon Palou could hang on, somehow win this stage, having gone solo pretty much for the entire race here on day 3. .5 kilometres is the total distance. It's interesting, if you look at 180 kilometres, and that's where he's sort of almost been at. That's what the distance is in an Ironman triathlon. Man, they often say in the Ironman that you can be feeling good at 140 kilometres and sort of sitting in the gutter at 150 if you're not careful, because there is always that exponential curve of fatigue, that little point where things just ramp up. In a marathon, they talk about 20 miles of hope and 6 miles of truth, or hitting the wall at the 30-kilometre mark, and then really having to sort of dig deep for that last 10 or 12 kilometres, and the wheels can come off pretty quickly. And so I think when we looked at this stage today, we said, well, 219 kilometres, probably 180 kilometres of hope and sort of 40 kilometres of truth for anyone that did get out. Interesting to see just young Luke Mudgeway too, from Ning Star, just out to the left. Just see the red shorts just there in the background behind the Kaha Rural Riders. Another one of the young New Zealanders in this peloton. So all of these riders will be tired now. It'll just be the distance that would have caught up with them. For some riders, well, the likes of Simon Palou and George Jackson, well, will be the distance, the altitude, and of course the intensity and effort they've had to put in terms of trying to stay away. And just start to see a little bit more body movement in some of the riders there at the back, just struggling a little bit with the fatigue and the climb still. As mentioned, rider there from Petrolite. Just looking a little not as smooth. White sleeve there with the aqua blue. There's Stana there with the blue helmet, the yellow and predominantly blue outfits. Team that is stacked with the likes of Aaron Gate, Kelly Gazzoli, Martin Lopez, Anton Kuzman, of course Henok Mulubran, Santiago Umba Lopez. And there is our race leader, and he is the highest ranked rider in this tour based on UCI points. Yeah, just looking at the performances of Guillermo Silva. He's had a very, very good career. Predominantly spent most of his career with this Kaha rural team. He is just 23 years of age, so he's got a big, big future ahead of him. Very much a one-day racer, good hill climber. He's been a two-time national champion of Uruguay. Wears those national road colour champion. Wears that national road jersey. It's been incorporated into his trade colours. So he won the Uruguayan Road Cycling Championships back in 2022, 2025. Just looking at other national champions, so we talked about Guillermo Silva there from Uruguay. We've got the Hungarian national road cycling champion, Martin Dina. Paul Wright, the New Zealander. And then we've got the Mexican road racing champion, David Cadena. Of course, Cadena these days riding for Petrolite. Martin Dina, the Hungarian, riding for Euskaltel Euskadi. And he is a GC rider, so another one that potentially would like to try and put himself into the mix if he got an opportunity. And was second previously as well at the national championships. And so, first time today that we have seen a rider from Solution Tech, Vini Fantini, decide to have a bit of a crack. A little bit of an attack here. It says, look, enough is enough. I'm going to go. Let's see what we can do. Possibly David Baldacchini, is it? We'll have a wee look shortly. It is the great man, David Baldacchini, who 2 years ago won the opening stage in the city of Zinning and won the final stage in the township of Cheka. So interesting strategy now being played out by the Solution Tech team. As mentioned, they've got the likes of Artilio Viviani, who have the ability to win the stage. Very good sprinter, Arno Tissiers, Andrea Pires. Sometimes too, riders who might be feeling a little bit flat often feel that maybe they need to go to the front and power themselves a little bit, can just get their heart rates up. That's not the case today so much, but you'll often see it in sports where you might just be feeling a little flat, a little tired. You think, well, I'll go to the front, I'll see if I can just get my heart rate up a little bit, and sometimes that can just click the nervous system in, then drop back into the bunch and you can feel okay. You'll often talk about riders that might stop for a little bit of a bathroom break and get back on their bike, and suddenly they've found their legs. And now David Baldacchini looking to go on his own, looking to maybe try and bridge the gap up to our race leader on the road, Simon Pelot. Our stage leader, I should say. On the road, it is still Guillermo Silva of Caja Rural. But Baldacchini, what a remarkable career he has had, 27 years of age, the Italian. From San Giovanni Bianco, was where he was born. We've had some very, very good Italian riders, some very, very good Spanish riders over the years, and we've had the likes of Francisco Canisco. David Baldacchini actually won the King of the Mountains jersey for the Tour of Slovenia back in 2024. Recent results, he was 20th in the Tour of Langkawi back in 2023. Finished third overall back in 2023 when he did win those two stages in the Tour of Qinghai. And then last year, I think it might have actually been stage 2 last year that he finished second in this particular race. Stage that was won by Eric Fagundes of Burgos, another Uruguayan rider. Astana team sitting there, looking pretty comfortable, is Martin Lopez, wearing number 3 for Astana. So he's got himself 30 seconds ahead now of the 30 seconds behind here, so looking to try and see if he can bridge the gap. This will be good for Simon Pelot if he could get Baldacchini alongside of him. Will just mean that Baldacchini probably got the fresher legs, having sit in the peloton for much of the day, has the opportunity then to come through. And so still game on. Peloton shutting down. Pelot, who was out to 3.5 minutes for much of the day, now down to just 1:20. As things start to gear up, they'll realise the danger that Baldacchini does offer in terms of overall stage honours. So Simon Pelot, is he aware of what is going on behind him? He'll be getting some updates on that race radio. So interesting dynamic starting to play out in stage 3. One rider, hopefully, well, best interests will be to be joined by a second rider. He won't back off at all. It'll be up to Baldacchini to catch him. Now it's just about concentration. It's been brutally hard for him physically all day. Now it becomes mental. Tough sport. But Baldacchini, the Italian, deciding enough is enough. Sitting there at, what, 43, 44 kilometres an hour. A slight breeze on a slight uphill. Arguably what cyclists call a bit of a false flat. Good form again. Nice and relaxed, soft hands. Always a sign. Don't want to see the white knuckles too much. White knuckles will come in that last 300 to 400 metres if it does come down to a bunch sprint. Last year, stage 3 was raced between Huzhu and Gida, so a different stage to what we're seeing today. It was still a distance of 202.4 kilometres. It was Manuel from VF Group Bardiani that ended up picking up the stage victory. And then it was Henok Mulubran from the Astana team who would finish second, and then our man who would go on and win the Tour, Jefferson Cepeda, would end up finishing in 3rd place, riding for Kaha Rural. And this year's race leader, Guillermo Silva, would ultimately end up finishing second to his teammate, Jefferson Cepeda. Cepeda not here this year. So the gap between Pillow and Baldacchini around about 260 metres, 22 seconds. Peloton still looking relatively pedestrian. It's just amazing how quickly they can shut this down, though, when they decide to put the hammer down. The forces, riders at the back tend to push the riders at the front. The riders at the front pull the riders behind. Got these two forces working together. Find yourself sitting in the middle of the peloton. You can be doing it quite comfortably as we have a look at Li Zizhen, riding for the Hyundai Hotel team, a trade team out of Thailand. In fact, I apologise to the Hyundai Hotel team. In fact, another one of the Chinese trade teams. Actually, you had the great Jonathan Monsalve win the Tour, this particular race back in 2017, riding for them. As we look over his shoulder, does he? Simon Pelot, or Simon Pelot. Still got a nice high cadence, pedaling beautifully as Baldacchini will start to bridge across. He's got a target now, Baldacchini. You can just see Simon Pelot, just got the knees out a little bit more, reaching down for a bit of a drink, so he's just taking the pace off a little bit. This is a chance for Baldacchini to close that gap. One will become two. And for Simon Pelot, he'll be aware that he's going to need to make sure that he has maximum energy available to him. So using this opportunity to eat and drink, get those calories in, get that high glycemic food into the bloodstream as quickly as he can. Baldacchini, look at him, very, very good bike rider, looking very comfortable. The Italian at an altitude of around 10,000 feet. Good crowd waiting in the downtown of Menyuan. So has he got one more big effort left in him? 44.6 kilometres to go. You'll know that will be literally around about, well, just under an hour of racing. He'd want to be breaking that down in his head, just piece by piece. Now has a look over, sees Baldacchini coming. Does he just back off just a little bit? Again, just drinking and eating as much as he can. Can he just get that second wind? Does he believe? Look at the heart in this man. You've got to have a head like granite at this level, folks. Baldacchini now looking back over, sees the peloton is nowhere to be seen. So really, really interesting dynamic playing out here in stage 3. I mean, the odds are very much in the favour of the peloton, and this all coming back together for a sprint finish. But stranger things have happened in the sport of cycling. So Baldacchini, man who has had arguably his best days in this Tour, in his cycling career, is about to join Simon Pelot the Swiss rider riding for Ning Star. And now he has a support network. He now has somebody to take some of the work. They can work together. They can put the hammer down. They can bury themselves out for small turns on the front. And he's delighted to see Baldacchini. I think Baldacchini is equally delighted to see Simon Pelot. And Baldacchini will just be taking a little bit more of a recovery, and then he'll come through. They'll be looking for opportunities. They'll almost be getting into a time trial type position. At the moment, still just this gradual, niggly uphill part of this stage. When they get to around about 30 kilometres to go, just under, then it is predominantly downhill through to the finish. What an athlete this man is. Set of lungs he's got. An absolute street fighter. What a warrior. Now he gives a little flick of the elbow. He says to David Baldacchini, come on through, mate. As we see the rest of the peloton still looking relatively pedestrian, still spread across the road, not one big long line yet. There's the Euskadi team. Start to put their jackets back on. Things just starting to cool down a little bit. Factor Racing as well represented. They very much featured on day one, did the Factor Racing team. Through their man, Neja Komac, who was very aggressive. Paul Wright, another one of their riders as well. Sven Mernick. Now we see one of the riders from Unibet, the Tima Rockets, just on the front. Maybe looking to try and get a little bit more buy-in here from the rest of the peloton. Kaharura boys are more than just happy at the moment. Their biggest concern will be those riders directly sitting second and third on GC. Behind their man, Guillermo Silva. The best placed rider is Jonathan Casido, who's 5 seconds back. Henok Mulu-Brandt from Astana, 9 seconds back. Zed Koif and the American from Unibet to Tima Rockets, 13 seconds back. Currently sitting in 4th place. Javier Serrano from Team Polti Visit Malta is sitting 5th on G, 13 seconds back. In fact, there's about a large group of riders 13 seconds back. So still opportunity for any one of these riders still in the days to come to try and steal this race. So get a bit of an update, 1:38. So it is coming down. And now we talk about the time trial tuck position, just a little bit of a chat to each other. Simon Pelot going, I don't quite have the legs, maybe. You might have to do just a little bit more work here for me, David. And if you can, when I do go to the front, I'll give it my all. Saying that, he still looks incredibly comfortable. Form looks good. Really hasn't changed from what we saw earlier on today. Pick up live coverage of first for the final 2 hours, but sitting here at the end of the finish line, I had the privilege of watching this race unfold earlier on, and I can tell you, his form still looks remarkable. Now, a little bit of no man's land here. It's flat. It's going to feel like Groundhog Day in terms of the scenery. It's going to repeat itself. It's not going to be necessarily landmarks that are going to somehow ease the mental burden. As we now just have a look at this rapeseed in the background. So we are up on the Tibetan Plateau, northern eastern part of China. In the Qinghai province, well, it's the largest province in the People's Republic of China. And the famous Yellow River originates in the southern part of the province, while the Yangtze and the Mekong have their sources in the southwestern part. Mountain range is the Ryui Mountains. And of course, Qinghai Lake, it's the largest saltwater lake in China, the second largest in the world. The average elevation, and this is what makes it one of the highest altitude bike races in the world in the Qinghai province, is actually 3,000 metres, so literally around about 10,000 feet. You've got the Tanggula Mountains, the Kunlun Mountains. Highest point is the Buka Dabin Feng mountain at 6,860 metres. In winter it can get down to as low as -18. Highest temperature as well, above 21 degrees. Now the Kaharuru boys, a little bit more urgency coming in now. They've decided to go and put some things, so that peloton, which was sort of grouped up and looking fairly controlled and laboured, is now starting to form that arrowhead formation at the front. As we see the likes of Alex Diaz, Juan Bo, Samuel Fernandez, Francisco Peñuela, Tyler Stites, the American, and Fernando Barcelo, along with the race leader Guillermo Silva, hunting these two down. Baldacchini and Simon Pelot, the Italian and the Swiss rider. Pelot in the King of the Mountains polka dot jersey. We just haven't had a chance to see it today due to the weather conditions, due to the fact that they're wearing their team jackets. So Baldacchini riding for VF Group Bardiani. And Simon Pelot riding for the Chinese trade team, Ning Star, sports brand here in China. A big brand as well. Almost China's equivalent of a Nike or an Adidas is probably the best way of putting it, if you spent time in this part of the world. Or Adidas, as they say in other parts of the world. So a minute 38. There it is. Unbelievable. Wow. Stunning. So, mentioned earlier, the city of Menyuan. It is situated on the Datong River, which the riders were riding along earlier today. The Daban Mountains, the Chilean Mountains. Chilean is the town they will ride to tomorrow. Enoch Mulubran, the African continental champion. 3 times he's won that, wearing that jersey, representing that. Saw Paul Wright earlier. There he is, the New Zealander, road racing champion of New Zealand, riding for Factor. Very, very good victory to win that earlier in the year in New Zealand. Had to beat the likes of the great George Bennett and some very good bike riders, including the man wearing the #1 race number, riding for Astana, the likes of Aaron Gate. Burgos have George Jackson and Josh Burnett in their team, 2 other Kiwis. The Australians, well, they're always everywhere, aren't they? In fact, the Cachet Body Wrap team is all Australian, with Cameron Scott, Alistair Christie Johnston, William Heffernan, Tully Lane Walsh, likes of Finn Walsh, Will Heath. Haven't really seen them at the front of the spike race at any point. As we do see Paul Wright decide to go to the front of the peloton, see if he can get something going. So sprint ace points, and happy to hand those over to David Baldacchini. There's Simon Pelor, says, you know what, I've got my King of the Mountains jerseys, I don't want to be greedy. I'm happy with the maximum points I've picked up today. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the other climbers in this tour with 5 stages to go. Now you just start to see real urgency coming in here. Sun just starting to break out. One of the real dangers when you do get some wet days, particularly off the back of dry patches of weather, is that can bring a bit of the grip to the surface, and often you do see a lot more riders picking up punctures. But the other real big innovation that we've seen in cycling over the last 10 years is technology changes, as we now, it looks like a few more attacks are about to go up the road, so more riders looking to try and bridge across. So fascinating the way this is starting to play out, and these will be the boys. Coming from Petro-like by the looks of it. So Jonathan Casido, David Cadena possibly. In fact, just really picking up that extra sprint point, so not really much of a gap between the leaders and sprint ace. So my apologies there, got a little bit ahead of myself. Thought we might have seen a tactical move there, but in fact it was just picking up the sprint points, picking up valuable UCI points. Yeah, there we go. First time that we've actually seen the polka dot jersey all day by Simon Pelor. What a proud moment for him too. Just showing that the weather has cleared. These boys mean now business. They're going to put themselves well and truly into the hurt box. 35 kilometres to go. Only a minute 15 out in front. You do feel it is inevitable, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. I was talking earlier about the change in technology. So much wider tyres these days by these cyclists than what historically was used. It was only 20 years ago everyone believed that 19 mil, 22 mil tyres were the best and maximum air pressure, and now it's gone the other way. Tyre widths from 25, 26, 27, even 28 mil. Tyre pressures can sometimes be as low as 70 psi versus what used to be considered sort of 120, 140 psi. And so science says that the wider tyres and slightly softer tyres roll quicker, but more importantly, absorb more of the vibration, which means less vibrations going through the body. And every time vibration does go through the body, it's basically forcing the muscles to almost rub, and that is energy being used. And so riders not fatiguing as quickly. But like if you take your hands and rub them together, you can feel that friction. And the heat that you are using, the energy, that must be body is using to generate that heat, and that's what vibration does. It does a similar thing to the muscles. So if you can reduce the vibrations going through the body, then the body is not going to use as many calories, use as much energy. See a real sort of nomadic population in this part of China. Farmers. Talk about the rapeseed as we head towards the town of Chilian. Tomorrow you start to see more yaks and farm animals, sheep. Now Baldacchini, a little bit more concentration here from both these riders. No talking now. There is no plan B. They've locked themselves into the hurt box. Bonfires will be starting to attack the legs here. They'll be playing the ultimate mental game, hoping that they don't crack, hoping that somehow in that main peloton. There is a discussion going on, but as we see it now stretched out on a much longer line that we've seen in recent times, it is very much game on. It will come down more than likely to a sprint finish. So a couple of riders looking to try and just break away. Talk about Paul Wright there, I think. No, one of the Factor Racing teams, riders. Try and get that number for you. Potentially, though, could be Ning Star, who was just so aggressive the first part of stage 2 yesterday, but also so aggressive on stage 1 in the town of Zinning. A big man, and is going to be joined by another team rider. One of the riders by the looks of it, possibly out of the Phoenix Scom Hengjiang cycling team. So beautiful conditions, contrasting conditions from what we saw earlier today at the start of the stage, and the sun has come out here at the finish line in Menyuan. 33 kilometres remaining. So 3 groups on the road. We've got our race leaders up front, Simon Pelot and David Baldacchini, these 2 riders here, and then the main peloton. Race started back in 2002. That year it was won by Tom Danielson, riding for the Mercury cycling team, the Great American. Damiano Cunego, the Great Italian, riding for the Italian national team in 2020 and 2003, won the 2nd edition. Great American Tyler Hamilton winning it in 2008. Andrei Mizarov of Kazakhstan in 2009. Jonathan Monsalve, riding for Qinghai Toyota cycling team, won it in 2017. Enoch Malulabran in 2023. Jefferson Elviro Cepeda of Ecuador, riding for Caja Rural, won it in 2024. They've got the race leaders yellow jersey at the moment to Caja Rural. In terms of Guillermo Silva, Lane Walsh, in fact, is the rider that has got up, so that is from the Karshay X Body Wrap team. So one of the Australian riders has got alongside of Ning Star, who we thought might be the rider from the Factor team. Just such a big, strong rider, just such an aggressive bike rider. Just that guy you'd love to have in a breakaway. He's the individual time trial champion of Slovenia, won that earlier in the year. So he certainly knows how to put his head down and suffer and hold an incredibly high wattage, incredibly high tempo, but they are going to be shut down. This peloton is just basically hanging them out to dry at the moment. Just gives the peloton a bit of a target. Meanwhile, David Baldacchini and Simon Pelot continue to lead this stage. Baldacchini came into this stage just 13 seconds back on GC. So he's technically the race leader on the road, the Italian. And that's why there will be urgency from the Caja Rural boys to shut this break down. But really nice to see the Australian trade team. See Karshay X Body Wrap team coming to the front of the bike race. And what a man to be away with, the Ning Star. And some of the remarkable scenery along the way. Such a rich history, such a long history. It's just part of China. So, Tali Lane Walsh, just 24 years of age, born in Preston in Australia, finished third in the Gravel of Tar Classic in New Zealand, 2024, eighth in the Oceania Continental Championship individual time trial, third in the King of the Mountains, the Tour of Taiwan back in 2025, eighth at his National Australian Time Trial Championships back in 2024, so still a young rider, still plenty of talent. Great to see the Australian now looking to try and break from the main peloton, looking potentially to try to ride up to the likes of David Baldacchini and Simon Pelot, who are the two riders who lead this stage. As we just pull back and again just have a look at this magnificent scenery 30 kilometres out from the city of Menyuan, up here in this Tibetan plateau at an altitude of 9,500 feet. It's hard to believe that, you know, the body makes a physiological change in terms of adaptation when you're at 2,000 feet. Normally 21 days is probably that adaptation period. Altitude training, well, it's a science in itself. These days the general consensus is that you live high, train low. It used to be that you just got to altitude and trained hard, but no, say spend as much time as you can at altitude, come down, do your hard efforts at sea level. It doesn't always, not an exact science, altitude training. I guess for these riders, for the 154 that started this tour, very much economies of scale. None of them really have had any chance to come and prepare for the altitude deprivation that they're all going to experience over this 8 days. So no one's really got that advantage. Such as the busy schedule of the UCI World Pro Tour, the World Tour, Continental Tour. So just having a look at the amount of points that Simon Pelot has picked up in his career at a UCI level. He's picked up 402 for GCI, for the GC, 228 points in terms of sprint points, 214 for one-day races, 206 for hills. Gap between Pelot, David Baldacchini and the peloton is around about 870 metres, we've been told at the moment. So, just that 10 seconds separating Tali Lane Walsh and Ning Star from the peloton. And peloton in minute 18. Minute 15 to the race leaders of David Baldacchini and Simon Pelot. So if the race was to stop right now, it'd be David Baldacchini who would end up in the race leader's jersey, as we see the Kaha Ruru boys come to the front. And Guillermo Silva there sitting fourth wheel in the yellow jersey. The Astana boys just tucked in behind. Good to see the Equipo Kern Farmer team in the green, also towards the front. Nice shot there of the gear ratios. A big chain ring on the front. Got that smallest cog on the back. Will probably be an 11. Second smallest will be a 12. Probably running a straight block up until a point. So almost maxing out their gear ratios. And just see there Ning Star. Just naturally a guy who loves to push that big gear. Good smooth pedaler. Slightly lower cadence than what we're seeing here from Tali Lane Walsh. And that'll just be based on individual physiology. You can just see the grimace and the suffering. They won't be used to altitudes like this, the Australians. And now Baldacchini wanting to strip the jacket, asking for a team vehicle to come through. Want it to happen quickly. Needs to be communicating here. quite pick it up. Skill set in itself. Be from one of the neutral vehicles. And now just getting that little bit of a hold onto the car. Just giving that little bit of a spring. Of course, commissaires will be watching all of that, particularly on the climbs, holding on to bottles for too long, out the windows of cars. All sorts of little rules that they'll try and push as far as they can, push the grey. Not dissimilar to any sport. So both riders with their deep carbon rim wheels there. What these days is the norm, the disc brakes. Gone are the days of the rubber ring brakes. Still the odd professional cyclist around, still preferring the rubber ring brakes. But certainly the disc brakes are a little bit more effective in the wet. Used to be stories of the rubber ring brakes when cyclists were descending at such high rates of over 100 k an hour that you just had to tap a little bit on the brakes. You didn't want to have to put the brakes on too hard. You could heat the rims up and potentially, back in the days of the alloy rims, heat the tyres up, heat the wheels up, or the rims up, and pop the tyres. Now obviously on this descent, trying to get into that aero tuck position. Aerodynamics kicking in at 17 kilometres an hour, certainly going well above that. I imagine they're probably sitting at about 60 odd kilometres an hour through here. And so still that minute 15 with 25 kilometres to go. You do just feel though at some point that peloton is just going to put the absolute hammer down and pull these two leaders in. It's been a remarkable day for Simon Pillot, who has been out in front of this bike race from pretty much the start of it. Race time now 5 hours and 4 minutes there or thereabouts. Almost been out on his own. Well, not out on his own, he was there for a long time with the New Zealander, George Jackson, for the first 140 kilometres, but really until David Baldacchini caught up with him. He then spent the next 40 odd kilometres on his own. And number 85 there, Manuel Peñalver, the man who won stage 1, who will be looking to try and pick up another stage. Very good sprinter, riding for Team Pulte and Visit Malta, so just wanting to make sure that he's got the lubrication on the gears, that he's going to have no problems when it comes to chucking down the big gears and working through those gears as he gets himself into a sprint. So we just have a look at some of the magnificent camera shots. Cameraman out of Belgium, Sebastian Verven, man who has been involved in 2 Tour de France's. We've got a very good Chinese contingent as well up there, operating the helicopter. And look at that, wow, isn't that stunning? Qinghai province of Northern China, folks, take a note. Put it on your must-do list. As Lane Walsh and Colmarts continue to try and somehow keep the peloton at bay. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. These two riders don't affect GC, so peloton not so concerned by these two, probably more concerned by David Baldacchini. The fact that he came into today's stage just 13 seconds back from Guillermo Silva of Caja Rural, so he is the race leader on the road. We'll just have a look at those gear ratios. A lot of these bikes these days, some flat races, you'll see the riders just having the one chain ring on the front. It was always just, again, 5-6 years ago, it was customary just to always have 2, normally a 39, smaller chain ring on the front, 53 is your bigger one. Just checking out the cycles and particular bikes at the end of each stage. Everybody running the 39-53 combination, possibly a 54. all running 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, straight block. And then it comes down to individuals in terms of the size of that cluster they want on the back. The biggest cog is part of that cluster in terms of their ability to climb. Not a great climber, you might want to put a 25, 26, 27 as your biggest on the back. Really good shot there of that cluster. And so big chain ring on the front, small cog on the back for non-cycling aficionados. That is the hardest gear they have. That is the biggest gear. That is their power gear. It's about trying to find the right gear for you based on cadence. You want to be spinning at around about 95 revolutions per minute. Some will ride at 100 revolutions per minute, maybe even higher. Some stronger riders might ride as low as 80, 85 revolutions per minute. Comes down to the individual, but if you can take your biggest gear and spin at the highest cadence, well, you're going to be a very, very quick, very, very good cyclist, particularly if you can do it on the flat. It's so difficult doing it on the downhill section. As we just have a look through these magnificent valleys here as we approach the town of Menyuan in the Qinghai province. Northwestern part of China. And it is the Kaha Rural Boys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Yellow jersey of Guillermo Silva sitting fifth wheel. And then a group of teams hoping to try and, well, win the battle today. Not necessarily win the war, but try and take the overall stage victory. So less than a minute now. And so at what point do David Baldacchini and Simon Peñalver wave the white flag? Got himself a bit of television time, chance to leverage maybe their sponsors, the likes of Solution Tech, Vinnie Fantini. In the case of Ning Star, well, obviously Ning Star, the sports brand here in China that is starting to make inroads internationally. Same opportunity here for the Australian team. Cache crossbody wrap. Now a little bit of downhill. It's so typical of this part of China. You can be driving along and then suddenly out of nowhere you see Ferris wheels like this that just appear for no reason and yet have such appeal. Another one of these remarkable lookout areas. So you look at those mountains there in the background, sitting around about 15,000 feet. There's the plateau that the riders are on, is around about 9,500 feet. Big crowd waiting in the town of Menyuan to welcome these riders. As we go back to the front of the bike race, as we see Simon Peñalver, a Swiss rider riding for Ning Star, and David Baldacchini, a man who has won 2 stages here in the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai in previous years. Back in 2023, won the opening stage in the town streets of Xining, and then the final stage into the town of Cheka, the famous salt lakes and the sculptures that have carved out of saltbergs. Really is a spectacular sight. Again, part of this region if you do travel to China. And now Ning Star gives a little flick of the elbow, says to Charlie Lane Walsh of Cache Body Wrap team, come through, do your work. There's the main peloton now. Starts to thinking a little bit about strategy. Start to visualise how this stage potentially could play out. Communication between the teams and their specialist sprinters. Baldacchini looking comfortable. Peñalver, well, he's been out there either on his own or with one other for over 200 kilometres now, and he still looks good. He's managed his hydration, he's managed his food intake, his calorie intake remarkably well. What a class act, what a bike rider. Tell you what, you take this man's heart, put it into any other athlete in any other sport, and you'd have a world champion, wouldn't you? Let's just have a look at the Factor bike here, another new bike brand. Yeah, a lot of science, a lot of technology these days in the bikes. Not too much room to work with in terms of what you can do and what you can't do. Certain dimensions that all bike designs need to meet. 6.7 kilograms is the minimum weight. Looking at trying to reduce that possibly in the future as the engineering and the technology with the likes of carbon fibre, titanium have become a lot better. It's about trying to make bikes light but without compromising in regards to safety. And so there we go, really good shot there. And the main peloton not too far away from gobbling up our long-time race leader, Simon Pelot, the man who bridged the gap about 20 kilometres ago, David Baldacchini, and these other two riders who left the peloton, Tali Lane Walsh and Nish Komats. It's a case of, do we see any other riders then look to attack from the main peloton? We certainly do expect to see some attacks go in the last 10 kilometres particularly. Key thing here for Qinghai Rural is just try and keep a tempo on front that is just so good, so strong. Keep it at above 50k now. It makes it very, very hard then for one rider to go on their own and do anything significant, unless they're the time trialing champion of the world. But almost impossible when you've got 200 odd kilometres in your legs. And so there we go. Tali Lane Walsh and Nish Komats. Well, their attack, their gutsy rolling of the dice will come to an end, because the Qinghai Rural boys on the front of that peloton are just doing the damage and closing the gap. Courageous break though from those two. Don't underestimate too, a bit of television time, as I mentioned, for some of their trade partners, their commercial partners. So down at the end of the year and you're trying to retain commercial partners, you can say, well look, this is the television time we did get, this was the global audience, this is the brand connection we got with a certain audience who loves cycling, an audience that you believe has a synergy with your potential customers. Baldacchini, they look over their shoulder. Simon Pelot, I think he knows that he's going to come up maybe 12 or 13 kilometres short. But what a day for him. He will extend his lead in that King of the Mountains jersey. So coming into today, it was Simon Pelot who led the King of the Mountains jersey with 12 points. Just 3 points ahead of Petros Mengs out of the Istanbul team. Johnny Getty from Euskaltel Ustadi had 7 points. Enoch Mulubraham, the man who won the Sprinters jersey last year and won the Tour 2 years ago, had 5 points, alongside of Johan Sobel. Timothy Ivanov, who had the King of the Mountains jersey after the first stage, had 4 points. He's picked up a maximum 12 points today, has Simon Pelot. So he will have a comfortable lead in that King of the Mountains jersey as we see our two intermediate riders getting caught. So the challenge from Manish Kolmat's Tully Lane Walsh has come to an end, and now just two riders out in front before the peloton comes together complete for the first time. And we will go to a sprint finish in the downtown streets of Menyuan. I can tell you that Guillermo Silva is the 63rd leader in the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai throughout its history. 62nd leader in the yellow jersey was Manuel Peñalver, who led after stage one. Jensen Plowright, the Australian, won stage one last year and was in the yellow jersey. He was the 59th ever holder of the yellow jersey. And Manuel Tarosi, who was in the peloton today, took the yellow jersey following Plowright last year. So, who wins the stage? Is there still another chapter to be written in the history of this race here on stage 3? Magnificent scenery. The gap now, well, 18 seconds, but very shortly it's coming down to 10 is what we are hearing. And the pain train is on its way. These two riders will just hook themselves on the back and be the caboose for a little bit. The Lanterne Rouge possibly within this peloton, and deservedly so, before they maybe recover a little bit and then look to try and see if they can contribute in some other way. Try and get their sprinter across the line in first place. And Guillermo Silva and his very impressive Kaha Rural team look to take control. Of course, big bonus seconds on the line, and they will realise the sprinting ability of Henok Mulubran, a man who won the Sprint Ace jersey last year, fourth on GC, winner 2 years ago from Eritrea, the African continental champion. He'll be looking to try and steal the stage and close the gap on Guillermo Silva. He is the big danger if it does come down to a sprint finish in terms of challenging the potential order of this race. Just again, it was Guillermo Silva who did have that lead, 6 hours, 7 minutes and 31 seconds, as we see our two race leaders challenge come to an end. Another rider, though, deciding to go up the road and have a bit of a crack. That is number 77 from Equipo Kern Pharma. That is Diego Urati. Hello, says I'm not done yet. David Baldacchini says, well, I may as well continue, but I just wonder whether he's just waved the white flag, Baldacchini, and said, no, enough is enough, I'm done. Good opportunity, though, for him. Again, really just a good chance to leverage those commercial partners and sponsors to a global audience. Just going back to GC starting today, so the gap between Guillermo Silva and Henok Mulubran is 9 seconds. So a stage victory for Mulubran might just be enough, assuming that Guillermo Silva finishes outside of the time bonuses. Might be enough to move himself into yellow. So 10 seconds for the stage victory, 6 seconds for second, 4 seconds for third. So Henok Mulubran, can he win the stage and keep Guillermo Silva outside of the time bonuses? It would be a remarkable achievement if he could. I mean, he's a good sprinter, but he's certainly not a pure sprinter compared to the more fancy sprinters in this peloton. Manuel Peñalver from Team Polti Visit Malta, who won day one, will be looking to try and win a second stage, as will Edward Grosso from Hangsheng Vanoa Taishan Sport, second in stage one. Alexander Salby, the likes of Miguel Fernandez from Equipo Kerner Pharma. We've got Christian Peta from Hangsheng Vanoa as well, so they've certainly got depth, and never underestimate the likes of Attilio Viviani. Still like the depth that you do see, particularly in this Team Solution Tech Vinny Fantini team. As we just go back through there and have a look at that Polti Visit Malta team, and Manuel Peñalver, number 85. Number 17 there for Euskotelu Stadi is under Gonzabal. John Aguirre, number 11. Number 56 is Martin Buding, another very good sprinter too, one that potentially has a chance of taking this stage, the man from the Netherlands, so do keep an eye on the Unibet Tetima Rockets rider, Martin Buding. Another little flick of the elbow from this Superman, this Iron Man, Simon Bilot of Switzerland. Joined by Diego Uriarte, 23-year-old. But really to no avail. 8 kilometres to go. Now things start to get a little antsy in the peloton. Things start to ramping up here. Concentration levels just begin to increase. These two riders will be caught. Big congratulations to Simon Pilot. That has been a superb bike ride from him. Wonderful performance from the man from Ning Star. Maximum points in the King of the Mountains today. Secures his place in that jersey. Just rolls around. Says, look, I'll just come back to the peloton. I'll just get a little bit of a rest now. Not sure he can contribute too much more. Still has a couple of very good riders in that Ning Star team who have the potential of possibly getting themselves in the fight if it does come down to a sprint finish. Particularly the likes of Alexander Solbay and of course Josh Kench. So now the Kaha Rural boys. Concern will be Henok Mulubran. They look to possibly lead out a sprinter from another team. Take the stage victory out of the equation completely. Done a really nice job earlier on today's stage, and it was a tough day. We saw the peloton absolutely get decimated on the first climb out of Huzhu, as they're making their way to Menyuan. That first climb saw the riders go to 11,300 feet. And it was the climb of Belongshan where the peloton broke up, but every single rider from Kaharuru made it across the top. When pretty much felt like someone had thrown a hand grenade into the middle of the peloton and just blown them across the road, showing the strength and depth they do have in the hills. One rider that potentially you can also not rule out is Aaron Gate, wearing the number 1 there for Astana. Won 4 gold medals at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham in 2022, including the road race, 3 on the track. Just start to see team is all beginning to just move their way up. Just saw the Team Polti Visit Malta team to try and set up another stage victory for Manuel Peñalver, Spanish rider who won the first stage in the downtown streets of Zinning. Now we see the Quick Pro team coming through there in the pink and sky blue. We've got the Kuno Farmer team. Martin Lars, also another rider that potentially could win this, as we see another one of the Chinese riders looking to go up the road. Good to see the Chinese national team deciding to have a bit of a crack here. The public would love to see that, and why not? It's done incredibly well to stay in the main peloton. Another rider to also watch will be Enrico Zanincello for VF Group Bardiani. Highest ranked sprinter on UCI points coming in is Martin Lars from the Quick Pro team. Luca Kolnagi, another one from the VF Group Bardiani. Evgeny Gidic from the China Anta team. Just depends whether or not they are still in the peloton. So here we go, folks. This is when things start to gear up. This is when it gets interesting. This is where you have to have incredible courage to be part of a lead out, to be a sprinter. You're born just a little bit different to do this. Team Baltic Visit Malta. They're in numbers. This is the Quick Pro team, looking to possibly set it up for the likes of Oscar Gut, Martin Lars. Last is who they will be riding for. Quick Pro team. .6 kilometres to go. Setting a tempo that's really going to prevent anybody from going now. Now we start to see the Unibet, their team of rockets looking to move. Carboni Giovanni, the likes of Adam Stockman. And of course Miguel Angel Fernandez. Riding for Equipo Kern Farmer. And so it is Equipo Kern Farmer looking to try and set the stage victory up. Can they get Miguel Angel Fernandez across the line in first place? Will it be the Quick Pro team of Martin Lars, the Team Polti Visit Malta team of Manuel Peñalver, Alexander Salby for Ning Star, Aaron Gate possibly for Astana? We are into the final stretches of stage 3. It's been a brutal stage, the 24th running of the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. The pain train spreads across the road. The speeds go from 50, 60, shortly to 70 kilometres an hour. Which one of these riders will launch them way to a stage victory here on stage 3? It is anybody's race. The crowd stands, they wait with anticipation. You can feel the hurt, folks. It is gladiatorial now. Here we go. It is now going to come down to who wants this the most, who's got the team tactics. Where does this one play out, folks? Wonderful race, VF Bardiani. Who grabs the stage win? Settle back. Here we go. Will it be Enrico Zanincello? Potentially it could be. It could be Zanincello. We'll have to wait for it. They come up, they cross the line. Who raises their hands first? It might be a stage victory, possibly for Ning Star. We'll have to wait. Was it Alexander Salby, maybe? We will have to wait. What a performance if it is, though. That is a stunner. That is a wonderful race for Ning Star. They enjoy the moment. Remarkable. Alexander Salby might have grabbed it. Josh Kench possibly, the Kiwi. We will confirm for you. Is this the biggest moment of this young man's career? Alexander Salby is our winner. Just confirming that for you. Just beautifully poised. A man from Denmark gets the job done. Great work by his team. What a moment for the local trade team out of China and Ning Star. He won the Tour of Thailand. He's had 3 stage victories in the Tour of Thailand. He's now won a stage in the Tour of Qinghai Lake. He won a stage in the Tour of Hainan. Nice work done by his teammates. That is a really, really good victory and thoroughly deserved, because when you look back, it was his teammate who was out all day in front. It was Simon Pelot who led most of this race, and it only seems like natural justice that Ning Star grabbed the win. They're at the front of the bike race all day, and while Simon Pelot couldn't get it done himself, it just seems like natural justice that his fellow teammate takes the stage win. What a day for the local team. Ning Star win the stage. Ning Star secure themselves in the King of the Mountains jersey. And that is a stunning victory amongst a group of world-class sprinters. And look what it means to him. Stand up, Ning Star, Josh Kench, Christian Relano, Simon Pelot, Luke Mudgway, Alexander Salby, Alexei Shrinko, and Raman Shishko. As we do have a look at Luke Mudgway there, joining and celebrating with this man. Alexander Salby wins stage 3 of the 24th running of the Tour of Magnificent Qinghai. A stage of 220 kilometres. A stage that had so much. As we look back over the city of Menyuan and confirming the results for you, Manuel Peñalver, the man who won stage 1, so close to picking up a second stage, finishes in second. Great performance from the Australian Cameron Scott. A 3rd place for him. Miguel Angel Fernandez and Luca Colnaghi running at our top 5. Well, don't go away, folks, because stage 4 tomorrow sees the riders reach 13,000 feet. Menyuan will host the riders for the night. It'll say goodbye to them. The town of Chilean will welcome them for stage 4. Hope you have enjoyed coverage of what has been simply a remarkable day. We've taken some highlights, taken some of the stunning scenery. As we say a goodbye here on day 3 from this beautiful part of northern China in the Qinghai province.